Hey everyone, welcome to D-Lab. I have a amp that showed up a few days ago from my friend Jeremy in Wyoming. I fixed quite a few of his amps and he just sent me this beautiful little Gibson BR-3. He and I attempted over email to get this amp going, but it turned out to be a little bit too much for him to deal with, so he shipped it to me. The amp powers, but there's absolutely no sound. Yet there is high voltage to the output tubes. Should be a pretty interesting repair. Another one of my friends out in New York, who I've done several repairs for, sent D-Lab a little box in the mail. Not really a little box. This thing weighs like 37 pounds. Okay? Can any of you guess what might be in this box? Okay? So I'll tell you that there are 12 compartments inside of this double core box. So I won't keep you in suspense. Let's see what's in the box. You've probably guessed, yes indeed, bottles of wine. This is a assortment of wine, right? So I got some whites in here, a Pinot, a nice cab. D-Lab is stocked on wine. You know guys, I do work for wine. To tell you the truth, if I had my way, this is all that I would do, truthfully. But right now, because of the way the world is and the need for medical coverage and all those things, I really can't take the risk. So in the meantime, I'll give you guys what I can. Alright, let's get into the Gibson. Alright, so let's verify what the customer is complaining about with the Gibson. He said it is completely dead, even though there are signs of life for 2 filaments in the indicator lamp. He said there's no audio. So I'm bringing her up. Now I don't know if you can hear it, but there is a slight hum coming from the speaker. So that indicates there's high voltage to the output tubes, which rules out the rectifier and our output tubes. However, how about the input section? Is it really dead? Yep. Oh, listen there. Just a very slight buzz. So what I suspect is we either lost screens to the 6v6s or we lost the high voltage feed to the preamp section. Okay, let's take a quick look at the schematic. Here's a schematic I located on the web for the Gibson BR-3. So we're going to trace out the power supply. Here's a 5Z4 rectifier. He goes up, feeds the plates of the 6v6s. Then we go through a 38K resistor, which feeds the plate of the 6J5, which goes through this interstage transformer. So we would expect to see high voltage at this point. It goes over and feeds some of the preamp section. We zing over this way through a 1 meg, got a little 8 microfarad cap, and he feeds the preamp tubes. So let's get a meter in here and poke around and see where we're losing high voltage. Alright, before we go bottom side, looking over the chassis, it appears as though this amp is still utilizing those old original filter caps. By now, they're probably really leaking and more than likely the cause of the problem. Alright, I about got the chassis out, but one thing I needed to point out, this is the lead that goes up to the output transformer, which is mounted on the back of the speaker. You need to make sure that remains plugged in for your testing. Alright, let me get this up where you can see it better. We'll probe around. I've got the chassis up on a block of wood, holding her nice and secure. Hopefully you can see everything. I had to kind of position it where I can probe and you can see at the same time. Remember guys, when you get in here, there's obviously some hazards. You got exposed 120 volts right there, and of course down here several hundred volts DC. Alright, so we're going to be very careful when we probe around. So let's take a look at the main filter cap, which somebody has replaced right off of the rectifier tube. Look at there. We got 422 volts. The other thing you want to take a look at, it's kind of tight in here, but on pin 3 of the 6V6s, you should see your plate voltage. Okay, and that tells you that going through the center tap of the output transformer and back, your output transformer is probably okay. Alright, so I'm just going to move down the line. We know we got plate, we more than likely have screen. This little guy here is the bias resistor. That's a little 200 ohm guy, goes to pin 8. You see I got about 20 volts there, so the 6V6s are pulling current. Then we go through that. On the schematic it shows it as a 38K resistor. This one has a 39K hidden right here, which goes to the second section of the filter cap. Look at there. I mean, like nothing. We go here, 422, go to the cap, nothing. So either the resistor is open, I just unplugged the amp, or that filter cap is directly shorted to ground. If the resistor opened, it probably is a shorted filter cap. Alright, so now we're in ohms. I'm at 200 ohm range. Leads are good. Let's go to where we saw 0 volts on the filter cap. Looky there. So yes, the multi-section filter cap shorted, killing the preamp power that feeds the preamp tube. So we need to change out the filter cap, and this thing will probably spring to life. Alright, so what I've elected to do for this repair is install a custom filter cap assembly similar to what you would see in a Fender amplifier. So it's built on a fiberglass board. These multi-section filter caps are difficult to find, and when you do, they're very expensive. And so we're going to mount this assembly on this back wall. There's a lot of room here. I'm going to leave the original filter caps in place, but swing the wiring up to the new module. So this cap board has a 47, a 22, and a 10 microfarad section, all at 500 volts. So I made two 1/8 inch holes on the back side of the chassis, and that is where these studs will mount on the insulated standoffs. This guy will lay in like this. Our grounds go here, our hot feeds here. Alright, there's the new filter cap assembly mounted on the back panel of the amp. I'm going to be installing a ground runner from all these negatives to the chassis, and on this side will be our hot feeds. So we're going to pull all the wiring off this filter cap. This added filter cap here is going to leave. The 15K resistor will swing up to this point, and we'll wire the rest of her up and test. My cap board will do this 40, that 20, and this 10. This 10 microfarad cap is off of that big 15K resistor that you'll see me wiring up. So we'll attack this, we'll fire up the amp, and then we'll go and replace the electrolytics in the preamp section. Alright, the new filter cap assembly is installed and wired up, ready to test. You can see I completely abandoned all the positive wiring going to the old filter cap. Many times in the past, I've seen guys that have had problems with hum in their amps, and they strap new caps to the old terminals of the old leaky cap. Guess what? You've still got leakage to ground. Very bad idea. Alright, let's give this guy an initial test. Now we have fresh filter caps installed. In case you're wondering about that 39K resistor that was cooking its brains out, I wonder what it measures now. Look at there. 61.6K. Oh yeah, she was getting hot. Alright, let's fire it up. What I'm going to do is just put something into the mic jack so we can see if there's any buzz, at least in the preamp section. Then we'll know it's alive. She's plugged in. Let it come up a little bit. There we go. See there? We already have input. Didn't have that before. Good sign. Alright, now I have to go into the preamp section, change out those caps, and then we'll try to put a tone through the amp. Alright, so this Gibson has two of the chassis mount can type filter caps. Alright, So this guy was for the main power. We have now installed a new assembly that bypasses that, but we're just going to leave it there because it looks cool. Now we need to go in here and do the same thing with the preamp filter cap, because I'm sure he is in just as bad a shape as that other. Okay, I've got all the new components installed on the Gibson amplifier. You can see my new preamp electrolytics. Got some Mallory coupling caps. There was the preamp 3-section filter cap, totally abandoned now. Sweep over here. Have our new main power filter caps installed on a nice vintage turret board. So what we're going to do is a live current test on the 6v6s. So I have an amp meter in line with pin 8 and the bias resistor. The bias resistor is identified as 342. Kind of strange. I'm guessing that's 342 ohms. Alright, so let's plug in the amp, and now from the bias resistor it's going through my amp meter and to pin 8 of both 6v6s. So as this current comes up, you are going to see the live current through those tubes. So I'm showing 60 milliamps of total current, which is acceptable for these tubes. So I'm going to put that bias resistor back in line. We'll get the new tubes in. Alright, I just installed a match pair of 6v6 Mullards. The old original tubes were a mismatched pair, a groove tube and an old tongue sill. Here comes our bias on the new set of output tubes. It looks great, nice and stable. I'm going to go ahead and power it down, solder that bias resistor back in, and then we'll put a tone through the amp, see what it sounds like. Alright, I just got off the horn with the owner of this Gibson. He wants me to leave those mismatched 6v6s installed. He said he already has some on hand, so that's a cost save for him. So what's the next question? How's the amp running? She's on right now. You can hear that little background hiss. That was normal for these amps. The input jacks do not have the shorting tab like you'd see in a Fender amp. So the preamp is always out there looking for something to amplify. Okay, but once you apply a signal, she's fine. There's plenty of gain on the microphone channel. This amp is good to go. It's a lot better than what it was when it came to D-Lab, okay? But there's two takeaways from this video that I want you guys to be aware of. Number one, if you had bad filter capacitors, if they're leaking, if one shorted out like this, don't put replacements in parallel across the old one, because you really didn't accomplish anything. The problem is still there. Always isolate or totally remove and replace the can type filter cap. Okay? The other takeaway, a lot of you are concerned about loss of original tone quality when you change out coupling caps and the little cathode caps in the preamp section. Alright, so I want you guys to think about this. These caps are 50 to 60 years old. They're leaking, okay? So that tone that you're getting right now, is that really the original as designed tone for the amp? No. So yes, it's always best to replace them. Just use quality parts. Thanks for being there, guys. We'll see you again.